Hello everyone and welcome back. Hope you're ready for some more reading because I've got my book, and as you can tell I have my therapy friends with me. So without further ado, excuse me, shall we begin? If you remember, I was about to read about the parent, the adult and the child. If not too sure, go back to the previous video. Just go to the end, that way you'll roughly remember where we were. Excuse me, she knows. The parent. The parent is a huge collection of recordings in the brain of unquestioned or imposed external events perceived by a person in his early years, a period which we have designated roughly as the first 5 years of life. Okay. This is the period before the social birth of the individual, before he leaves home in response to the demands of society and enters school. The name parent is most descriptive of this data inasmuch as the most significant tapes are those provided by the example and pronouncements of his own real parents or parent substitutes. Everything the child saw his parents do and everything he heard them say is recorded in the parent. Everyone has a parent in that everyone experienced external stimuli in the first 5 years of life. Parent is specific for every person, being the recording of that set of early experiences unique to him. Data in the parent was taken in and recorded straight without editing. The situation of the little child, his dependency, and his inability to construct meanings with words made it impossible for him to modify, correct, or explain. Therefore, if the parents were hostile and constantly battling each other, a file was recorded with the terror produced by seeing the two persons on whom the child depended for survival about to destroy each other. There was no way of including in this recording the fact that the father was inebriated because his business had just gone down the drain, or that the mother was out of wits end because she had just found she was pregnant again. Okay. Just remember, people, it is admittedly hard to go through hard times, but you should never use that as an excuse to take your frustrations out on other people, okay? So even if you have lost your job or your business has gone down the drain, please remain calm and try not to take it out on those you love, because they will remember it forever. Back to the book. In the parent are recorded all the admonitions and rules and laws that the child heard from his parents and saw in their living. They range all the way from the earliest parental communications, interpreted non-verbally through tone of voice, facial expression, cuddling or non-cuddling, to the more elaborate verbal rules and regulations espoused by the parents as the little person became able to understand words. This set of recordings are the thousands of no's directed at the toddler, the repeated don'ts that bombarded him, the looks of pain and horror in the mother's face when his clumsiness brought shame on the family in the form of art effals, broken antique vase. Now, once again, it's worth remembering that this child is literally a child still. And children will do stupid things, silly things, that do occasionally bring embarrassment. But just remember, okay, when a child is that young, they don't really know what they're doing. So just be careful with the words you use, alright? Because once again, they could grow up and remember those things. And as I know, there's nothing worse than being yelled at for something you accidentally did. Just a little few thoughts there for you all. Likewise, I recorded the coos of pleasure of a happy mother and the looks of delight of a proud father. When we consider that the record is on all the time, we begin to comprehend the immense amount of data in the parent. Later come the more complicated pronouncements. Remember, son, wherever you go in the world, you'll always find the best people and Methodists. Never tell a lie, pay your bills. You are judged by the company you keep. You are a good boy if you clean your plate. Waste is the original sin. You can never trust a man, you can never trust a woman. You're damned if you do and damned if you don't. You can never trust a cop. Busy hands are happy hands. Don't walk on the ladders, nor unto others as you would have them do unto you. Do others in that they don't do you in. Many things and examples that you may have been told in life. I'm neither condemning nor endorsing any of those statements, by the way. So don't go thinking this is what I think, alright? I am neutral, as far as I'm concerned, when it comes to all those. Make of them what you will. The significant point is that whether these rules are good or bad in the light of a reasonable ethic, they are recorded as truth on the source of all security. The people who are 6 feet tall at a time when it is important to the 2 feet tall child that he please and obey them. It is a permanent recording. A person cannot erase it. It is available for replay throughout life. This replay is a powerful influence throughout life. These examples, coercing, forcing, sometimes permissive, but more often restrictive, are rigidly internalized as a voluminous set of data essential to the individual survival in the setting of a group, beginning with the family and extending throughout life in a succession of groups necessary to life. Without a physical parent, the child would die. Okay. Probably true, but don't have to say it. The internal parent also is life-saving, guarding against many dangers which perceived experientially could cause death. In the parent is the recording. Don't touch that knife. It is a thunderous directive. The threat to the little person as he sees it is that his mother will spank him or otherwise show disapproval. Worth noting that nowadays most cultures do not like it when you spank. It's often looked down upon by the law. Just remember that, people, and also your child will remember that. Where was I? The greater threat is that he can cut himself and bleed to death. Yeah, that's technically true. He cannot perceive this. He does not have adequate data. The recording of parental dictates then is an indispensable aid to survival, in both the physical and the social sense. Another characteristic of the parent is the fidelity of the recordings of inconsistency. Parents say one thing and do another. Parents say don't lie, but tell lies. They tell children that smoking is bad for their health, but smoke themselves. They proclaim adherence to religious ethic, but do not live by it. It is not safe for the little child to question this inconsistency, and so he is confused, because this data causes confusion and fear. He defends himself by turning off the recording. Yeah, that's very true. Of course, I don't need to keep giving advice on these things, but if you do have children, or ever do intend to, one thing I will say is, try not to be a hypocrite. Don't stop your child from smoking if you're going to smoke yourself. Simple things, really. We think of the parent predominantly as recordings of the transaction between the child's two parents. It may be helpful to consider the recordings of parent data somewhat like the recording of stereophonic sound. There are two soundtracks that, if harmonious, produce a beautiful effect when played together. If they are not harmonious, the effect is unpleasant and the recording is put aside and played very little, if at all. This is what happens when the parent contains discordant material. The parent is repressed or in the extreme blocked out altogether. Mother may have been a good mother and father may have been bad, or vice versa. There is much useful data which is stored as a result of the transmission of good material from one parent. Since the parent does contain material from the other parent that is contradictory, productive of anxiety, the parent as a whole is weakened or fragmented. Parent data that is discordant is not allowed to be a strong positive influence in the person's life. Another way to describe this phenomenon is to compare it with the algebraic equation. A plus times a minus equals a minus. It does not matter how big the plus was or how little the minus was, the result is always a minus. A weakened, disintegrated parent. The effect in layer life may be ambivalence, discord and despair, the parent that is, who is not free to examine the parent. Much parent data appears in current living in the how-to category. How to hit a nail, how to make a bed, how to eat soup, how to blow your nose, how to thank the hostess, how to shake hands, how to pretend no one's at home, how to fold the bath towels, or how to dress the Christmas tree. The how-to comprises a vast body of data acquired by watching the parents. It is largely useful data which makes it possible for the little person to learn to get along by himself. Later, as this adult becomes more skillful and free to examine parent data, These early ways of doing things may be updated and replaced by better ways that are more suited to a changed reality. Persons whose early instructions were accompanied by stern intensity may find it more difficult to examine the old ways and may hang on to them long after they are useful, having developed a compulsion to do it this way and no other. I'm not even trying, just taking a few seconds to catch my breath. The mother of a teenager related the following parental edict, which has long governed her housekeeping procedures. Mother had told her, never put a hat on a table or a coat on a bed. I can tell you now, I've done both of those in this life. More than once. But we keep that secret, alright? So, alright? So she went through life never putting a hat on a table or a coat on a bed. Should she occasionally forget, or should one of her youngsters break this odd rule, there was an overreaction that seemed inappropriate to the mere violation of the rules and simple neatness. Finally, after several decades of living with this unexamined law, Mother asked Grandmother, by then in her 80s, Mother, why do you never put a hat on a table or a coat on a bed? Probably would have been better to ask this several years ago, but what can you do? Grandmother replied that when she was little, there had been some neighbour children who were infested. Her mother had warned her that it was important that they never put the neighbours' children's hats on the table or coats on the bed. Reasonable enough. The urgency of the early admonition was understandable. In terms of Penfold's findings, it was also understandable why the recording came on with the original urgency. Many of the rules we live by are like this. The lesson here that it's always good to question things. You should never, if you don't understand why you're doing something, you should always find why you do it. And if someone says that you just do it just because, then that's not really an answer. Chances are they won't give you a proper answer, because they either don't know themselves or they don't want you to know why. In this case, the hat was never put on the table and the coat was never put on the bed for reasons of hygiene, which I think is fair enough. But it would have been better if Grandmother actually told her daughter why in the first place. Could have saved a whole lot of bother. Some influences are more subtle. One modern housewife with every up-to-date convenience in her home found she simply did not have any interest in buying a garbage disposal unit. Her husband encouraged her to get one, but now all the reasons this would simplify her kitchen procedures. She recognised this but found one excuse after another to postpone going to the appliance store to select one. Her husband finally confronted her with his belief that she was deliberately not getting a garbage disposal. He insisted she tell him why. A bit of reflection caused her to recognise an early impression she had about garbage. Her childhood years were the depression years of the 1930s. In her home, garbage was carefully saved and fed to the pig which was butchered at Christmas, provided an important source of food. Dishes were even washed without soap, so the dishwater with its meagre offering of nutrients could be included in the slops. As a little girl, she perceived that garbage was important, and as a grown woman, she found it difficult to rush headlong into purchasing a newfangled gadget to dispose of it. She bought the disposal unit in the end and lived happily ever after. Again, question why you do things. However, one thing I will say is, if you're not going to do any work in the kitchen, which traditionally husbands in this era didn't, it's probably best to assume your wife knows best. Of course, nowadays, both partners should put in the effort into doing housework generally. Unless, of course, you have a special arrangement where one does all the money earning work and the other does everything in the house, then okay. But mostly it's done by both couples. And I would suggest, if you don't do much, do a bit more. Help your partner out. And don't go insisting they do things that they say they don't really need. Just my 2 cents there. When we realise that thousands of these simple rules of living are recorded in the brain of every person, we begin to appreciate what a comprehensive vast store of data the parent includes. Many of these edicts are fortified with such additional imperatives as never and always and never forget that, and we assume preempt certain primary neuron pathways that supply ready data for today's transactions. These rules are the origins of compulsions and quirks and eccentricities that appear in later behaviour. Whether parent data is a burden or a boon depends on how appropriate it is to the present, and whether or not it has been updated by the adult, the function of which we shall discuss in this chapter. There are sources of parent data other than the physical parents. A 3-year-old who sits before a television set many hours a day is recording what he sees. Programs he watches are a taught concept of life. If he watches programs of violence, I believe he records violence in his parent. That's how it is. That is life. This conclusion is certain if his parents do not express opposition by changing the channel. They enjoy violent programs. The youngster gets a double sanction, the set and the folks, and he assumes permission to be violent provided he collects the required amount of injustices. The little person collects his own reasons to shoot up the place, just as the sheriff does. 3 nights of cattle rustlers, a stage hold-up, and a stranger fooling with Miss Kitty can be easily matched in the life of the little person. Much of what is experienced at the hands of older siblings or other authority figures is also recorded in the parent. Any external situation in which the little person feels himself to be dependent, to the extent that he is not free to question or to explore, produces data which is stored in the parent. There is another type of external experience of the very small child which is not recorded in the parent, and which we shall examine when we describe the adult. But that is all going to have to wait for another time, because tonight's reading session is over. Now, one thing I will add, granted I've never had kids, but I will say, if you let your children watch too many violent shows, they may develop ideas that violence is always the answer, when it rarely is. I mean, I don't think violence is really the answer in any case, except maybe self-defense and dealing with, seasonal. Actually, I should probably bleep that word out. In case you're not wondering what the bleep word is, I was dealing with, fascist types, the kind. Kind that cause nothing but misery and destruction. It's okay to use violence with people like that. And in self-defense, but other than that, I don't really see any reason why anyone would use violence. I really don't. But that's just me. I, however, was raised with more wholesome cartoons. I mean, I remember there were violent ones about when I was a kid, but I wasn't really into them that much. I mean, the cartoon I remember mostly from my childhood was the Moomins, and they were just nice. They probably did affect my worldview. But anyway, enough of that. I have to get going because I have things to do. So until next time, take care of yourselves. Bye.